Presented by Raytheon, making the world a safer place.
This week on Campaign 2018 Election Hacking, we examine the havoc bad actors could potentially create by exploiting software flaws in critical infrastructure on Election Day. This includes our defense, energy, food, water, emergency, and transportation systems.
CNET senior producer Dan Patterson spoke to former White House Chief Information Officer Teresa Payton. She's also a cybersecurity and intelligence specialist. She explained what one of these attacks could look like on Election Day.
As you know, Election Day is a day. You know, there's early voting, but Election Day is a day. So the question is, if ransomware hits, what's the backup plan to allow people to vote? Do we extend it another day? Do we hold off the tally of the votes? Do we take absentee ballots? What do we do?
All right, so Dan Patterson joins us now with some possible answers. Yeah, what do we do?
Well, darn good question. Look, almost every cybersecurity expert I spoke with said that we need policy to move at the same speed as technology, especially when we think about critical infrastructure, which is all of the things that helps our cities run and function. A lot of this technology is just old, and as we move from the internet era into the Internet of Things era, that's connected devices on valves and sensors and pressures. This is called the Industrial Internet of Things, and we need to look at the vulnerabilities of old hardware and software, and we need policy to work with the private sector to examine these vulnerabilities and figure out good solutions for different types of systems.
Right.
So how could critical infrastructure hacks disrupt an election?
Well, in the same way that a natural disaster could suppress voter turnout, if we see a cyber attack, even a small cyber attack, let alone a massive ransomware attack like that which hit Atlanta last year or earlier this year, it could suppress voter turnout, especially in key swing districts. And cyber attacks that target our communication systems could keep voters from getting the information that they need to really be informed when it comes to Election Day.
Are we talking about things like, I don't know, shutting down electricity grids or making sure that the stoplights are all out of order so the traffic's all jammed up? I mean, are those the sort of vulnerabilities that are possible?
Yeah, so I actually spoke to Teresa about this. Let's check out what she had to say.
Then you also have, as you mentioned, the critical infrastructure of the towns that the votes are happening in. So, for example, if you end up having any kind of the emergency systems that are used in a town are typically on their own radio frequencies and signals. If there's any kind of jamming of those types of signals, in the event there's bad weather, you know, a lot of times Election Day is a snowy or icy day in some situations in parts of the country, and a flooding day in some parts of the country. So the question is, will you have traffic lights? Will you have lights? Will you have those channels of communications for emergency systems? And all of those things are incredibly vulnerable to attack. The question is, who would decide to go after those? Where would they do it? It's not all standardized, so it'd be hard to hit everybody at once. And then what would the motive and what would the gain be? And typically, if you have capability and you have motive and there's something to gain, it could potentially happen.
It does seem like something out of a movie plot, you know, but I mean, are we that vulnerable?
Well, our critical infrastructure is that vulnerable. Look, many of these attacks are not necessarily designed to be cyber attacks, but they exploit things that are accidents. So, for example, if you'll recall, just before the presidential election in 2016, on October 21st, if you tried to log into Facebook, Twitter, Google, or use the internet at all, it was really hard. That's because a botnet called Mirai targeted not just the United States communication systems, but internet communication systems all around the world. Now, this was developed by two hackers who wanted to hack the Minecraft game servers. But you better believe that if these guys were just trying to take down a video game server, that adversaries who want to harm communication structures are using very similar technologies. Another example is throughout 2017 and into 2018, we saw Russia probe the U.S. energy grid. Now, I talked to Teresa about this, and she said, look, let's not freak out. This isn't exactly like a movie. One of the best things about our power grid is that it's decentralized, just like our voting systems. So you can't just throw a switch and take the grid down. However, they are, in her words, preparing the battle space. Now, this is what military experts describe as just figuring out the lay of the land, figuring out how the grid works and how different grids are diverse grid functions and functions with other components of critical infrastructure. So these are two very recent examples, but the list goes on and on and on of just this very old hardware and very old software leading to vulnerabilities that are open to exploit. And you better believe that if it can be hacked, it will be hacked.
Scary words.
Dan Patterson, thank you. All right, for more of Dan's reporting on this, you can check out cbsnews.com/election hacking. Our election hacking series continues next Wednesday. We'll speak with Dan about the hackers targeting our elections. That's next Wednesday right here on CBSN. We will be right back.